So, Christopher Nolan has a new movie out called Tenet. Christopher Nolan is easily one of my favourite directors around at the moment, so I've been incredibly excited to see this movie. Despite being delayed 3 times due to this pandemic, I finally got a chance to see it on opening day in a socially distanced, practically empty cinema, and it was pretty great in a lot of ways. I'll be avoiding spoilers in this video, so you don't have to worry about any of that if you haven't seen the film yet. In a lot of ways, this film is more reminiscent of Inception than any of Nolan's other movies. Similar to the way that film took the heist genre and flipped it on its head with a sci-fi element and an incredibly creative premise, Tenet does the same thing but with the spy genre. Much of the movie can be compared to like a James Bond movie with its huge action set pieces, which include car chases and even a scene where an airplane crashes. Nolan has been very open about the fact that James Bond was a huge influence on the film, and this was basically his idea of basically making his own James Bond movie in a lot of ways. But the script is completely original and filled with some of the most unique and exciting action sequences I think I've ever seen. The film follows the idea of a palindrome where many sequences go forwards and backwards in time, and although these sequences can be incredibly confusing at times, they're super interesting and enjoyable to watch. The direction, choreography, and sheer spectacle of this film is top notch and really what makes it so fun to watch. Performance-wise, there is some great acting in the movie. John David Washington is incredibly charismatic despite his character really lacking any depth. Robert Pattinson is really great in the movie, as is Elizabeth Debicki, and even Kenneth Branagh, despite his character being almost cartoonish at points. Debicki and Branagh's relationship in the film is one of the main plot points, and although it's one that I don't think is as interesting as it could have been, was still pretty entertaining to watch at points. However, I do think Branagh's accent was a little bit over the top, as was Aaron Taylor Johnson's Cockney accent, which I find baffling considering he's a British actor. There's something about the accent that was super cheesy and didn't sound real at all. Where I think the film really struggles though is in its storytelling. Although I think the film's story is really great, the execution of it really falls apart due to the lack of anything really being explained. And I'm not saying this needs to be a film where Chris Nolan constantly holds our hand and explains everything and tells us like what's gonna happen and things like that, but I just think the way that there was so much unexplained and left up to a mystery made the film a real confusing mess to get through. We are told what the characters are doing and the consequences of what happens if they don't do it, but never why. We're never told why the consequences are the way they are or how it even works. The film seems to constantly speed past its exposition and important plot points to get to more action and more big set pieces. It's almost just assumed people would work it all out without having it told to them, and in a lot of ways it feels like Chris Nolan kind of went into the film with a good premise and some great ideas for set pieces, but didn't really have any explanation or anything like that in between planned, and kind of just threw in whatever he could think of and didn't really explain it or build upon any of that at all. It all leads to a film that isn't confusing because it's complicated like Interstellar was. It instead leads to a film that is confusing because pieces of key information are either completely left out or just glossed over. And the film also features some of the worst sound mixing I've ever heard in a movie. One of the biggest criticisms of I think every single Chris Nolan film is his sound mixing is terrible. Rewatching Interstellar and Inception and The Dark Knight Rises recently made me realize that it's an issue that most of his films really have, but this film easily had it the worst out of any of his movies to date. Everything apart from the dialogue is too loud and bass heavy to the point where the film sounds completely muffled coming through large speakers at a high volume. The screen I saw it in was unbearably loud, which I don't know if it was done intentionally or by accident, but it made some scenes super grating and hard to get through. It's possible that much of the exposition I'm saying the film needed was actually there, but was drowned out by the music so I couldn't hear it. There was multiple scenes where I couldn't hear anything the characters were saying because it was just completely completely drowned out. Nolan has said before that he does this in films intentionally, and in a film like Dunkirk, it makes complete sense. The point of that film isn't to see characters talking and explaining motivations or anything. The point of that film is to be thrown in the middle of the war and experience what the characters are experiencing. But in something as complex and dialogue heavy as this, it makes literally no sense. And despite rushing through important plot points, the film feels too long. The last hour seems to be just a collection of set pieces that each could have been the final action sequence, but it just keeps going on and on until it eventually ends. But despite these pretty major issues, I do still think Tenet is a really good movie, in a lot of ways great. However, I would only recommend going to see this film if it's safe to do so, if where you're from has a very small amount of cases, if your theatres are operating at 50% or lower capacity, and if you wear a mask, then I would recommend seeing it. This isn't a film worth rushing out and risking your life to see, although to be fair, I don't think any film really is. But if it's possible for you to see this film in a safe manner, I would highly recommend it. It's not my favourite Christopher Nolan movie and probably falls into the latter part of his filmography. It's still a fun, exciting thrill ride that, despite falling short in many departments, I still highly recommend seeing. I'm going to give Tenet 3.5 stars out of 5.